a long time since we talked about the Golf. I think about 6 months since the last upload, so I thought it was fair to give you an update on what's going on with it. If you're new to the channel, this is my 1984 Volkswagen Golf, and I've restored this thing to this state from being abandoned for about 22 years in a street in one of the rainiest cities in Europe, and now it's almost ready to be registered and to be on the road again. I did drive this thing on my wedding a few months ago. I was supposed to drive my BMW E28, which is so far from being done that we decided to just finish the Golf because we thought it was closer to be done. If you watched the last video, last time I think we finished painting it, the engine was already in, there were some things to be done with the engine like the electrical stuff, the carb and stuff like that. But at the time I thought the car was much closer to be done than it actually was. So in today's video I just want to go over everything I've done to the car since that last video, which is quite a lot, and we've done everything in about a week, because by the time I realized I won't be able to finish the E28 for the wedding, we decided to finish the Golf, and it was a big mess. My friend Mateo helped me finish it. We spent a couple really late nights working on this thing, and I actually got it driving and on temp plates the day before the wedding, which was crazy, but yeah. And now it's been sitting here for about 4 months. I wanted to finish it and register it, but I broke my shoulder, so now it's waiting for me to be able to work on it again. Realistically, it needs about 5-6 hours of work, and it's going to be ready to be registered. Now let's get through everything we've done to the car. Let's start with the engine bay, because this thing gave us a lot of issues. So yeah, if you remember, the car was originally 1.3 carbureted, and I got a 1.3 engine out of a Mark II Golf thinking it would be the exact same thing, but of course it wasn't. There's so many differences between this engine and the original engine from the car. So this engine uses a different ignition system and has some basic type of ECU. It's this thing right here. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, basically there's a box here that's the ECU for the car. And going from a car without an ECU, completely mechanical, to something that has at least some type of ECU meant that the wiring wasn't exactly the same, so we had to splice into the wires to actually get the ECU to work and to get everything sorted so we would have spark. I didn't get this ECU with my engine, so when I bought the engine I only got that. I didn't get the ECU or the wiring, so I ended up buying the complete wiring harness from the same guy that sold me the engine, and then we could finally get things sorted. Also, I couldn't find any information on the ECU, but we managed to figure out how it works. It's just basically getting power to the ECU, so we ended up taking power from the coil, which means when the car turns on, the coil gives power to the ECU here, and then there's these 3 cables that go from the ECU to the actual ignition, and then we got sparked. And that fixed that. The second issue we ran into is the alternator wasn't working correctly, so we had to figure out what was wrong and get it fixed. Luckily, Mateo managed to get the alternator fixed. I didn't ask questions because I don't know anything about how an alternator works, so I didn't really care. All I cared about is that he managed to get it fixed, and he did. So the alternator was fixed, we managed to get it all wired up, and that was it. Moving on, the next issue was the carb. So if you remember, I got my carb rebuilt. So this was the carb that I originally had in the car. Now it's all taken apart again, but yeah, I got it fixed. This is just the jet, maybe don't lose that. we got it rebuilt, resealed and everything, but it didn't work correctly. So I managed to find the exact same carburetor. And do I actually want to remove this now? No. But basically my neighbor had the exact same carb, so I managed to get that off of him and we got that bolted on. Now the engine is a Mark II engine, but the carb we used was the Mark I, so the carb that I got rebuilt was the carb from my original engine from this car, and the carb I bought was the exact same, so same Mark I carb. Why I didn't use the Mark II carb, let me show you. I actually can't show you because I threw that carb away. But basically, the carb from the Mark II engine was Pierburg carb, which runs a lot on vacuum lines. It has about 5 vacuum lines going to it, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I hate having to deal with those. I used to have the exact same carburetor on a previous car, and it was always a mess to set it up and to make it work correctly, so I decided to just go with this one because this one is a lot simpler and easier to make run well. So once we got the carb in, also I had issues with the studs from the old carb being blocked in my inlet manifold, so I had to deal with that and spent basically a full day just figuring that out. And after I did that, we managed to get the carb in and we got fuel to the car. At least the cooling system on this car is very simple. I knocked it out in one day. A lot of the stuff is not perfect, but we got it working. Water flows through it and it doesn't lose pressure, so that's okay. Now that everything works, what's left to do in the engine bay is actually fix all of the wiring, because although everything is wired, everything works, it's a big mess. So I want to clean it up, at least make it make sense, because if you look at this, yeah, this is not something you want to see in your engine bay. So I'm gonna be cleaning all of this out probably in the next video, because wiring is probably the only thing I can do at this point with my hand not being really useful. Okay, let's get into the car and see the interior. So if you remember, I bought new seats, well, new seats from a different Mark I, those are in. I also got the door panels in, the whole dash is done, the clock actually works. I need to connect the horn and we need to replace some other stuff. Let me show you the switch panel, which has one switch. This is the radiator fan. The fan switch didn't work, so actually it's not that it didn't work, it's that I didn't have the correct plugs for the fan switch, so we ended up just making this and making our life a lot easier. And the other thing on the panel is this light, and the light just shows me whether the alternator is working. So usually it has a faint light when it's working. If it's not working, it will light up like this, and that way I know we're not getting power. This just prevents me from breaking down in the middle of nowhere. If I see that the alternator is not working, I know to either pull over or go home and bake. I have 2 temp gauges down here and neither of them work. This one kind of works but doesn't really show you the temperature, and this one is not connected at all. So I should do that at some point, but for now I don't care because the temp gauge on the cluster actually works. This thing right here is the choke, because the choke usually sits on the other side, but we didn't have a long enough cable. The cable that was in the car was broken, so we made a new hole, got a universal choke cable, and that works. And here's the car turning on. If you remember, I had a full new set of rebuilt calipers for the car because my old calipers were broken and I couldn't fix them. And there was a big issue with the calipers as well. Let's try to take the wheel off so I can show you. Okay, so if you remember, I bought brand new calipers, which are these ones, and they were perfect. Well, they seemed perfect. There was no apparent issue with them until I started to put on my brake lines, and that's when we realized that the brake line threads on the calipers were reversed. Now, I don't know why they would be reversed and who at Volkswagen thought, oh, let's make reverse brake line holes. But yeah, so to thread anything in, you had to go lefty-tighty, which didn't make sense. I asked a few mechanics and no one ever saw this, so I don't know why or how, but it's impossible to get reverse threaded brake lines, so I had to get these adapters made so I could run normal brake lines in these calipers, which took about 3 days to make, and that ended up being another huge headache with this thing, but at least now it's sorted, the brakes work, and that's okay. But yeah, I don't know why or how someone would make reverse threaded calipers. I did find a few mentions about them online, and Volkswagen obviously did produce them, but I don't know why. So yeah, this is probably the rarest part you will find on this car, and it's really idiotic. So the car doesn't really run the best. When you take the choke off, a lot of the time it dies. When it's really warm, then it works okay, but has a bit of breakups and needs to be sorted a little bit. Probably the carburetor needs adjusting, but yeah, it is working somewhat. So now let's get to what else we need to do to the car to get it working. Also, I don't know if you can tell, but it's so hot today that I'm sweating even in the garage, which is usually quite colder than outside. I have a bunch of parts to get this thing sorted, starting with these. So I have both new arms for behind the steering wheel for the lights, signals and everything else, because it seems that the car doesn't want to turn all the lights on when it needs to, and most of the lighting stuff goes through here. Everything does get power to here, but then the power doesn't always get to the lights. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So I got both new arms, that way we can replace them and hopefully fix the issue. Now I did try another set of arms that I got used. I had this set that I got used, but it also didn't work. So my friend Mateo again actually found these ones brand new. So we're gonna put those on at some point when I have my arm. The next thing we need to do is the clutch. This is the clutch cable. And here we have the new clutch assembly. So clutch and pressure plate, and also throwout bearing. Basically the usual new clutch assembly that you would do on any car, because the clutch in this car actually is dead. In any gear that you are, if you give it gas, it just starts spinning the clutch and you don't go anywhere. I managed to limp it here from home, and basically that's it. I don't think it would even go out of the garage at this point because the clutch is just cooked. So we need to do that. We need to adjust the carb to make it run a bit better and clean up all the wiring. I think that's it. We need to change the tires because they're all, do some minor stuff, maybe do a bit of clearance on the wheels because the front wheels are way too pushed out, so it rubs everywhere. But mostly the car is done, at least for me. I really don't care too much about having everything perfect because this car is fun just the way it is. I don't really want more power because I don't really need it. I really enjoy driving this car as fast as it will go, and you can just push it all the time and not even break the speed limit, but it's fun, it makes noise, and I don't know, it's just fun and stupid. So all we need to do is basically clean out the engine bay and change the parts that I showed you, and then we can get the car registered, maybe lower it a little bit more, because right now it's way too drivable and I want to be miserable when driving this thing. So obviously we're gonna lower it to make it more cool and less drivable. That's it. I don't know what else to say. Thanks for watching. Next video we'll be cleaning out the wires in the engine bay, and then we'll go on from there. Hopefully in about a month I'll be able to actually work on the car if my shoulder does heal up in the time that it should. Okay, thanks for watching. See you in the next video.